So, dear friends, the topic for tonight is about, I called it Bringing Philosophy to Life. And it came out because of a particular something that happened for us here in this community. We spent the entire month of November doing different reflections about the mindful awareness of death. That's a theme that we usually take. And now coming to December, I was approaching sort of like the culmination of this death awareness theme, which really does bring us to the contemplation of Nibbana, or the reaching towards what it would be to comprehend or to experience the deathless. I had brought this short teaching as a sort of an evolution from the death awareness, from the Kachana Gota Sutta. It said that Kachana, this world, mostly relies on the dual notions of existence and non-existence. But when you truly see the origin of the world with right understanding, you won't have the notion of non-existence regarding the world. And when you truly see the cessation of the world with right understanding, you won't have the notion of existence regarding the world. The Buddha went on to say, the world is for the most part shackled by attraction, grasping, and insisting. But if, when it comes to this attraction, grasping, mental fixation, insistence, and the underlying tendency, if you don't get attracted, grasp, and commit to the notion of myself, you'll have no doubt or uncertainty that what arises is just suffering arising. And what ceases is just suffering ceasing. Your knowledge about this is independent of others. So the question that came up from one of the residents was, how shall we practice with this in our daily life? What does it signify for our sila in relation to our colleagues in community and in relation to the world? What does it, how does it help us to do what needs to be done at the stage of practice where we are, which may be very much involved with experiencing the arising of different kinds of afflictions and trying to learn how to mindfully, with great clarity and a lot of energy and urgency, to really quickly take care of those afflictions and negativities that can arise, so that we can keep the space in our life for calmness and tranquility to grow, which then provides the base where we have the possibility of contemplating this ever-turning process of the mental formations and the mental process and so forth, and everything in our psychology that is creating a self that then we have to struggle with all of the ramifications whenever the self rears up in a form of some kind of a conceit or reactivity. So then how does the struggle of a person who's on the path relate? How does that relate to these profound, timeless statements and understandings about the nature of our very existence? This kind of reminds me, in a certain way, we're in the month of December, and there's quite a lot to do in December, because after December comes January, and it's the end of the year, and there's quite a lot of things that need to be taken care of just because it's the beginning of the new year, and then we enter into our winter retreat sometime in the middle of January for a couple of months, and so then there's some chores that have to be done connected to that, and then when we emerge from the retreat, then it's going to be almost time for Songkran and Vesak, and then somehow we need to at least set some kind of a foundation in place so that it won't be too traumatic for us coming out of the retreat in March. And so, how to take this, like the long list of chores and the challenge of dealing with that in a context or in the framework of this vast wisdom. This is the first week of December, and we are commemorating the beginning of the voyage of the Arahant Sangamita, the daughter of King Asoka, who was called to come from India to Sri Lanka to ordain the women there who wanted to become bhikkhunis and to enter the holy life. In a certain way, I can try to imagine and emulate what it must be like then. Sangamita was an arahant. She was not living in the palace where all the politics was happening. I believe she was living in the city where her mother had come from, in a place that was much more separated, that had the time and space for contemplation. And then this call comes. Say, well, now you have to organize a sea voyage. You have to organize a sangha of bhikkhunis and obtain a cutting from the sapling of the original Bodhi tree, and this great delegation, and organize to get on a ship and take a sea trip and encounter a lot of politicians in Sri Lanka who have gotten enthusiastic about Buddhism and want to establish Buddhism in Sri Lanka. And then not only does she have to do that and organize an ordination, organizing an ordination is a really lot of work. We had one this past June, and it takes a lot of care at many different levels, from the sublime to the ridiculous, to organize an ordination. You have to care for the individuals and for the tender and very special and vulnerable space of a candidate who's about to take this tremendous step. So that's like one level, and then you have to organize the flowers and the statues and the carpet and all this other practical things, and you have to organize having a sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and make sure that that you've got an adequate number and that they're pure, and that there's a lot of considerations about this has to do with the continuity of Buddhism and the idea that the Buddha passed away. He went to his parinibbana. He's not in this world anymore. And the followers of the Buddha are rightly concerned that what the world gained from the Dhamma that the Buddha explained should not be lost. Or even if we know that eventually all things are impermanent, and this existence in the world of human beings who understand the Dhamma, who have become enlightened through the Dhamma, and who are capable of passing down the tradition, it hasn't been lost yet, one may think, and we don't want it to be lost. We want this sasana to last for a long time. And so then the concern about the organizing an ordination is that it's supposed to be perfect and beyond criticism. You don't want to have any mistakes happening during an ordination ceremony such that a critic might come along and say later on, oh, that ordination wasn't valid, and that whole group was not really ordained. And then, they could question everything after that. So there's that. And so Sanghamita has got to face, from the stance of being Sanghamita Terry is fully enlightened. She's like the Buddha. Why even continue to stay in this world? One could just enter parinibbana and have done with it, or just enjoy the bliss of meditation. And yet this call comes to make this trip to organize this ordination. And it wasn't just like ordaining one candidate. This was ordaining Anula Devi at the time, that was the queen of Sri Lanka, together with 500 ladies associated with the Royal Palace in Sri Lanka. That's a symbolic number that means a large group of women who wanted to be ordained. And not only did she have to undertake doing this ordination and giving the teachings to prepare them for the ordination, she then became the leader of that Sangha and spent the rest of her life as an abbess. Of course, they didn't have the title of abbess at that time, but as the founding teacher of a large Sangha and monastic tradition of women in Sri Lanka, which surely must have multiplied. And so that would be a whole lifetime of service, of needing to practice the art of prudence and diplomacy, to have to encounter and be in touch with all different kinds of people in the process of leading a community of bhikkhunis, in touch with so many bhikkhunis and candidates and trainees who are at different levels of their training, and then to also encounter the faithful supporters, the lay people who are supporting, and then maybe also encountering the critics or the people who were opposed, and also keeping up one's cordial relationships with the Bhikkhu Sangha. And so there must be a way actually to be a fully enlightened person and yet be so fully actually engaged in the world sufficiently to be able to give this lifetime of service. So those of us who are not yet arahants may then have this need to take care of the path of their practice. That's the patipada, practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma, taking the step-by-step program that's laid out by the Buddha, making the effort to follow the teachings of the Buddha in a way that's complete. And there's another reading that we had recently. Recently we had an anniversary related to Sariputta. And we were reading his Theragatha, his verse of enlightenment. And one of the, a couple of the lines in the verse of enlightenment was giving the advice, when you eat the food, when you eat your meal, don't eat too much. Stop before you're completely full and have a glass of water. And so this is, part and parcel of all of the practicalities of life, which yet are in service of coming to this space where the delusion about non-existence regarding the world and the delusion about existence regarding the world are wiped away. To put it another way, there's the Buddha was said to be not that much concerned about that branch of philosophy which is called ontology, which has to do with that which is real, or how you determine what's real or what's not real. But there's a very practical sense in which, as we go through our lives, depending on where we're at in our evolution, a different aspect of things can seem to be much more real than others. So, for a person who doesn't have any training, it might be that survival and status are the driving reality. And questions about ethics could seem to be sort of like abstract. That sometime or another they could get interested in thinking about ethics, but then if somebody, if they're in a car crash, or if somebody insults them, or if they are facing a competitor in their business or something like that, then all of a sudden, the ethics sort of flies away, and they're in that emotional entanglement about something that's connected to their status or their survival sense. But then, if a person has gained their initial right view in this path of practice, and they understand about causation and about karma, then actually the sense of karma could be much more real than some kind of concern about survival and status. So that even if there was a situation in which one's life was threatened, or one's position was threatened, that the fear about the consequences of doing something that's taking on some negative karma is much more important, more present, more real to us than simple concern about survival and status. And then likewise, as we develop on this path of practice, then the inner purification of the mind and the seeing the danger in the arising of different kinds of afflictive or deluded reactions can become a much more, in a way, like real to us. That one could become actually aware of the possibility that, like, a deluded thought could come along. A thought could arise which is fueled by greed, or fueled by aversion, or fueled by delusion. And if we come to know the difference between right view and wrong view, then one would immediately be horrified and ashamed of having a ill thought come along that's driven by greed, by aversion, or by delusion. And on the contrary, if we if we know the difference between right view and wrong view, if we're able to have the, very frequent or constant awareness of, like, how are we approaching the chores that we have to do. You've got to organize the sea voyage. You've got to organize the ordination of 500 ladies. You have to organize establishing a monastery for the bhikkhunis. You have to organize their training. All these things, have to be done. And so while all those things are being done, having that continuous conscious awareness, like it's all happening in a context of right view. So, for myself, I'll put it yet another way. This is another way of thinking of it. I have a tendency, I do sometimes speak to you more like from the heart or from my personal experiences. But very often when I speak to you, I'm speaking in terms of the suttas. And my reasoning for this, I would be able, if I chose to do so, I could talk to you about science, I could talk to you about sociology, I could talk to you about politics, I could talk to you about, I guess my master's degree was in public administration. I could talk to you about public administration. I could talk to you about, all kinds of things that are not part of the Dhamma, or I could talk to you about psychology, popular psychology, or modern ideas about the philosophy of mind, or other things from a Western perspective. But in so doing, even though I recognize that my potential capacity to fully acquire a right view is coming from a place where I'm approaching the Dhamma with my own past culture and education. Bringing that framework to these ancient teachings. And somehow, like two eras meeting, there is the possibility that these ancient teachings, the words on the page, and the words that I hear from accomplished living teachers, can be received in a way that's transformative. I don't find it so useful to have a continuous sort of like a comparative religion or a comparative culture dialogue going on in the mind all the time of saying, how does this compare to that? How does the ancient teaching compare to the modern? How does, having that dialogue going on all the time? But rather, what's more useful is to kind of like dive into the teachings, dive into the sutta and the Dhamma, and then dive into the way of life, and to be sort of like swimming in this thought world. so that then some clarity can come about, not so much from the comparison, but from being immersed in the thought world of the ancient teachings. We're kind of lucky in a way to have our Dhamma has, besides this monastery, there's the other center, which is the Aranya Bodhi Hermitage. That's a very rustic situation with without it lacks indoor plumbing and central heating, and it lacks central electricity, so that then it's sort of in some ways like how people might have lived at some time in the past. And there are certain aspects of the Vinaya, of the practice, that make a lot more sense in the context of a primitive lifestyle. And so it's very enjoyable to live that life and have just the sort of the sensibility, the reason to emerge. One of the teachings is not to defecate in water. So at the Hermitage, defecating in water would mean defecating either in the creek or too close to the creek, which would create a definite health hazard for anybody who's downstream of us. But when we live in the city, we're using the flush toilets, and that water is, we are defecating in water every day. But then that water is taken away, and the city of Pengrove and Rohnert Park takes care of processing it, so it's not going to cause any harm to creatures from the danger of that. But that particular rule is then makes sense when you're camping out, when you don't have central plumbing. It makes a lot of sense to remember. Yes, absolutely. Don't defecate in water. Don't do anything dangerous. Don't hurt the insects. Don't hurt the plants. Be careful. Realize that just the way that you trample around is changing this continuous fabric of life, which is the natural world. And if you get 10 or 15 people walking around, or occasionally have 40 or 50 people walking around, and then you can sort of see that where they're walking around is getting a bit trampled down looking. There's a space, well, it's one of the central spaces that we use at the monastery. I was there early enough, so before there was anything there, I was the forest. I was in that place, and it was this very beautiful, small, natural meadow filled with wildflowers and surrounded by the redwoods. And now 1/3 of the area is covered by gravel, and there are numerous paths crisscrossing here and there, and there are ditches that were beautifully built by the man who takes care of the roads so that the water would go the right way without um, without hurting us. And then there's just a few, small little patches of nature left on that landing. And I tried to explain to people that, they say, "Why don't you mow the lawn?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to mow the lawn. I don't want to get the weed whacker and cut down the lawn. I want to keep one little small patch, even if it's only 10 feet by 10 feet, that could be just allowed to be natural. And that if I could put a string around it and say, no human is allowed to step on this little tiny patch that's going to be a remnant and a remembrance that used to be this entire, it's not such a large area, but this whole area was once just only nature, and now it's occupied by humans. And so then we realize that the web of life is so vulnerable to being affected by us, and we could develop this care and concern, which would be based on loving kindness, that one would become really unwilling to do any harm to anybody at all. And perhaps even with that, this is again, I'm like how bringing philosophy to life. If you had right view, if it was well established in you, would you not naturally arise? I have so much compassion for the dukkha that you see all around, for all the beings who are not yet there in terms of right view. And wouldn't you be willing to do everything that can be done to ameliorate that harm and that danger, so that this is why, and the Buddha's in the reflection that I just read you, the Buddha starts with this very abstract statement about existence and non-existence, and then his very second sentence, paragraph is about really about compassion. The world is for the most part shackled by attraction, grasping, insisting. But if when it comes to this attraction, grasping, mental fixation, insistence, and the underlying tendency, if you don't grasp onto the notion of myself, then you'll see that what arises is just suffering. What ceases is just suffering ceasing. And so then that it's a profound philosophy. It's not seeing, that you don't see beings arising and ceasing. You don't see the self arising and ceasing. You don't see any quality or factor as being permanent. You don't see it as personal. The suffering of the world doesn't threaten you, and yet you know that this is the arising of suffering. And so then herein the ethics can become not even particularly driven by fearfulness about the consequence of evil karma, but rather seeing the magnitude of the dukkha in the world, becoming big enough, capable enough to manifest compassion, where in effect we, to whatever extent that we're holding on to this right view, to whatever extent we really have got this right view, then we are like a refuge for the world or a safe place for the world. Because whenever we act or speak from this standpoint of right view, we're not harming anybody. We're giving that space of safety. I shall stop speaking now and invite any comments or questions. I hope this was coherent. Again, this is not really a scholarly talk, but just more like a theme talk and really a question. How is it that these timeless, eternal truths, the worldview of Buddhism, how does it manifest in our practice? Those in the room are also welcome to speak. I'll call on Richard.
Thank you, Ayya. So I was keeping in mind, and you just repeated it, that you said, how is this type of idea from the sutta that you were quoting, how do we practice this? And in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Mahavag, the fifth book, section 48, the Indriya Samyutta, there's a sutta number 53 called a trainee. And so I won't read the whole thing, it's not that long, but a person comes and asks the Buddha, he says, actually, no, it's a Buddha addressing the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, is there a method by means of which a bhikkhu who is a trainee, standing on the plane of a trainee, might understand, I am a trainee? While a bhikkhu who is one beyond training, standing on the plane, one beyond training, might understand, I am one beyond training. So they say, our knowledge of the Dhamma is rooted in the Blessed One. Please explain to us, what this is. So there is a method, bhikkhus, by means of which a bhikkhu who is a trainee might understand, I am a trainee. While a bhikkhu who is one beyond training might understand, I am one beyond training. Now, a trainee in this regard, and I know people may not want to hear me say this, but a trainee in this regard means one of the three levels of noble disciple. And one beyond training means an arahant. The other levels, which I like to call a loving friendship follower, right? What's the word? Oh, it's escaping me right now, but a confidence follower and a Dharma follower, those are followers. Buddha doesn't describe them as trainees because you're trying to develop yourself first you're attracted to the Buddha, you're attracted to the Sangha, and so you feel friendship, and so you start going and associating, and you give charity and things like that, and then you develop confidence sufficiently enough after a period of time that you take on precepts. So you become one who takes them because your confidence has grown so much, and then you continue on in your studies, and you try as much as possible to penetrate the Dharma, and at some point, listening and going over and hearing the Dharma and going over it in your mind, etc., you have a breakthrough, and you become a sotapan, okay? And so at that point, you become a trainee. So the Buddha says, and what, bhikkhus, is the method by means of which a bhikkhu who is a trainee, standing on the plane of a trainee, understands, I am a trainee? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu who is a trainee understands as it really is. This is suffering. He understands as it really is. This is the origin of suffering. He understands as it really is. This is the cessation of suffering. He understands as it really is. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This is a method, a means by which a bhikkhu who is a trainee standing on the plane of a trainee understands, I am a trainee. And there's some other things by which he looks and sees, no one but the Buddha is teaching this, right? And things like that. And that he has these faculties. The faculty of, people like to translate as faith, I prefer confidence. Confidence, the faculty of energy, the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of concentration, and the faculty of wisdom. Like that. And then there's the one who is beyond training. And it says he has all those same faculties too. He dwells having contact with the body, their destination, their culmination, their fruit, their final goal, having pierced it through with wisdom, he sees. That's one way. And another is he understands the six faculties, the eye faculty, the ear, etc., tongue. He understands the six faculties will cease, totally without remainder, and no other six faculties will arise anywhere in any way. This too is a method by which a bhikkhu who is one beyond training stands on the plane of one beyond training, understands I am one beyond training. So it's this penetration of the Four Noble Truths that one knows, oh, I'm actually a trainee, because then they understand, because now they possess the path, the Eightfold Path, and they know how to start progressing on the path. Their knowledge may not be complete in everything in the Dharma, but it's sufficient to see, okay, now I know what I have to do. Now I know how to proceed. So anyways, so that's where this type of what I would call, the real practice, now you're moving towards the goal. You're moving towards ending samsara. You're moving towards, achieving arahant. Anyways, that's just my opinion. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Venerable, do you have anything to add about this? Because you were in the room when it came up last week. You want to talk about loving kindness? I'm calling on Venerable Tavira.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on, every day we're making just absolutely countless decisions and, choices in terms of how we act and how we respond to things. And yeah, it's just always a process of trying to make those actions and those responses as skillful as possible and see where we've, there's the places where we fall short and we know we've fallen short. There's the places where we can't even see ourselves clearly enough to realize how we're acting unskillfully. And so then we're trying to see that more clearly. So it's just really like continually learning to see more clearly, learning to recognize where we've not acted as well as we could, learning to just like make really gradual improvements. And yeah, I would hope that all of our kind of consideration of these more, philosophical, abstract, deep truths, it's just like we need to somehow pick those up in a way that helps us make, like, okay, like this tiny little choice that I'm making in my mind, how do I make it more skillful? And I think sometimes that really, like, seeing that bigger picture and saying, like, how can we pull ourselves out of the story of our lives and see the bigger picture, and then from that bigger perspective, it then helps us take all of those little tiny things a little less seriously, and maybe it's a little bit easier to then be like changing our behavior because we're not quite so caught up in, this is my story, this is how I've always done things. But yeah, I feel like ideally it helps us make those small decisions better. It doesn't, in practice, it can be hard to like connect those things, or like you say, the reaction comes up and it's just like, it takes over our minds and it's hard to like pull ourselves out and remember, but that's why we're training ourselves.
I'll call on Corina.
Thank you. My experience has also been that if I hold these bigger truths in mind, they almost work in like an unconscious way, like organically, maybe is a word. So I'll have like a mundane problem Tavira, appreciate, how you're connecting that to all these daily little choices we make, decisions we make. And when I'm doing that, I may not consciously be thinking about these bigger truths, but yeah, they've sort of seeped in and they come out. And I especially find it when I have a bigger issue or a bigger problem, um, and that I can't seem to figure out logically or consciously. And then I'll go to sleep, I'll wake up, or I'll be brushing my teeth, and I'm like, oh yeah, oh, that's this. And I'll see a connection between things.
Yeah, thank you. I guess for me, the merger of, I'll say, right view with practice comes from it's centered in mindfulness and developing the constant mindful awareness, especially of the inner states, the states of mind, and then there are those moments when the old habits of reaction are lifted, and it can happen if the mindfulness that is there, that's really really present, really on, that then one can see how that arises, so that, like, in this moment, all anxiety, reactivity, or negativity is lifted, and one can understand, have a glimpse of that, like that whole process of how those negative states were arising and were repeating themselves, and then how they disappeared. And when that's discovered, and then we know that the view of the self, and then all of the anxiety and reactivity and everything that's associated with that view of the self, you'd know for sure that it's optional. Even if, like, sometimes that selfish or self-centered view sort of can come back if we forget to sustain the mindfulness. We can, once you know that that's just it's nothing but a fabrication, then one has so much more freedom in connection to that. And so this is a way that even when one is still subjected to a lot of anxiety and reactivity, that one can, by practicing the mindfulness and all the postures, getting as much dedication as possible to get enough cushion time to really develop or strengthen that mindful awareness, then there's a chance to see it. There's a comment that someone made in the chat about how dangerous the world is right now, and how a lot of humans, good people, are actually threatened, that they've become treated as object of hatred and revenge, or feeling targeted, feeling in danger for physical safety, in danger for psychological or social safety, because of the developments in the world. And to my mind, this is something that we really need to be aware of and to take to heart. And this may be another a whole other conversation, but it seems to me that the Buddha recommended that one should not kill, and one may advise others not to kill, or one would not kill, and one would not support killing or endorse killing. One would not be cruel, and one should not support or endorse cruelty. And so one should not tell lies in the form of malicious propaganda. And one should not support the telling of lies in terms of malicious propaganda. And so, in that way, I think it's possible, even for one who's obtained whatever they've obtained on this noble path, to be also able to be able to speak up for virtue, and to acknowledge the fear and anxiety that could be experienced by people who are subjected to the particular traumatic moment that we feel that we're in right now. And of course, knowing that in earlier years there were other ways that different persons, different kinds of people in different places, people in all different circumstances have been subjected to trauma and suffering and illness and mental illness because of the just what the Buddha spoke about in terms of this world, which is shackled by attraction, grasping and insisting. So we, I just want to, I guess, express acknowledgement and respect for all the people in the world who are actually targeted, like the target of ill will or the target of cruelty, the target of different kinds of exploitation, simply to recognize that that suffering is real. And it's not personal, it's just the arising of suffering. But at the same time, we recognize the individuals who may need special care, special kindness, and special solidarity in order to help them to be able to not lose this path of practice, to not be really overtaken by fear and reaction. This is just on my mind at the moment. It's 9 o'clock. Let's pay respects to the Triple Gem and say good night. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham.
Thank you for the lesson, Ayya. 3 bow to our teacher.
By the power of all the Buddhas, the power of the silent Buddhas, and the glory of the Arahants, may you be protected in every way.
Good night, Ayya.